It's actually really a trust gesture, right? It's a respect
Mm.
thing that I respect you and trust you enough to be able to hold this boundary. And actually, what we just heard can increase anxiety.
Welcome back, friends, to Notes to My Nervous System. I'm Erin, mom, therapist, and creator of the Mind Circuit app, a little emotion regulation tool in your pocket. Today, I'm super excited. We are joined by Dr. Jennifer Dragonette, and she's an expert in boundaries and relationships and codependency and the nervous system and all the above. And I'm super excited to have her here. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Erin. It's great to be here with you.
Now, not to put you on the spot, but I do that because I like to ask questions I'm curious about. How in the field?
So I've been in the field a long time, a little over 20 years at this point, 22 years in the field.
You don't
Yeah.
look it, which is why my brain went there.
Thank you.
Because
I
I was like,
appreciate that.
I know she's been doing this for a bit, but mm,
Yeah, I'm coming up on 50, so I appreciate that very much.
we'll have to talk off camera about what you do.
Sounds good.
But I'm sure being in California with all the sun, that is so good for your mental health and physical well being.
And nervous system and all of that. Yep.
All that
Fresh
above.
air, getting
Yes.
outside. Absolutely.
Yes. So you've been doing this for a bit. What made you go and be more, I guess, laser focused, passionate, all about boundaries and codependencies and relationships and including the nervous system in that? Because that's so important, but it's not done a lot or brought up a
Mhm.
lot. The idea of the nervous system and how that impacts how you show up within a relationship.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll very, very briefly just tell you kind of my trajectory because it's a little unusual. So I went to graduate school to be a psychologist, got into the field, was working as a psychologist, and then actually ended up landing in the substance abuse field, which was not what I expected, and gave me just enormous insights into some of those dynamics, including codependency, which I know we'll talk about a bit today, and a lot of respect for the way that family systems orient around challenges and problems and
Mhm.
how tricky it can be to change those systems. And so I came in kind of through that door and also was trained as a DBT therapist and an ACT therapist and saw all of these lovely overlaps of those orientations. And then, despite my best interest, got pulled into leadership and spent many, many years kind of working up in quotes through levels of leadership until I really wasn't doing clinical practice at all anymore several years ago. And so about 5 years ago, I made the decision to step out of that world and come back into my own clinical practice. And it's been interesting because I certainly have had moments where I think, oh, if I had just only done private practice, that's my love, that's my passion.
Mhm.
And yet I think having these layers of different experiences has been really rich. And it's helped me see both from a clinician standpoint and also just people I've supervised, folks who've worked
Mhm.
with me and around me, and my clients, how our nervous system shows up and how frequently it is actually leading the charge in terms of how we're responding in relationships, how we're responding in the workplace, the stories we're telling ourselves. It's like this overlay in front of us and often between us that if we're not aware of what's happening internally, we're going to march down the road of what we think is happening. And so is the person we're talking to. And oftentimes, particularly in my work with couples, I feel like I'm looking at people with these thought bubbles coming out of their heads. I know
Mhm.
you're thinking this about me, or I know you're thinking this about
Mhm.
me. And we're almost helplessly letting those stories talk to each other. So, really in my work, I find so much richness in trying to get clear on, what is it that we actually are thinking and what isn't the information in there? What is our
Mhm.
nervous system trying to tell us? And what are the boundaries that we're not setting? And why aren't we setting those? Because I just
That's
think there's so
such
much
a good
richness there.
question.
Mhm.
Now, do you think the not setting the boundaries leads into the codependency or leads to it, or they're just so intertwined or
I think it's a both and. I think
Okay.
often, we don't set boundaries because we worry about what that might feel like to somebody, or that they will think we are a
Mhm.
certain way if we do, or they won't like us if we do. And
Are those narratives again?
exactly, right? And then it reifies itself because we often then don't set the boundaries that are actually authentic, and we teach people how to treat us. And so they treat us according to the boundaries that we do set or not. And then
Mhm.
we wonder why we're resentful or the relationship doesn't feel the way we want it to. And they're doing exactly what we taught them to do with us, because we've pretzeled ourselves into what we think someone else wants us to be like. And we don't even really know. And half the time, more than half the time, it's not even what they want from us. And so I just see people with this distance between them in relationships that feels really heartbreaking and unnecessary.
How do you what do you suggest for couples to even ask that question or approach that question? You know, what is it that you want from me? What is it that I want from me in a relationship? It's
Mhm.
not like we sit down and have these conversations or have even taught each other how to have these conversations.
Yes. So I really try to help couples move from what I think of as a guessing culture to an asking culture. And it's hard. I mean, it's very simple and it's not easy. Most
Mhm.
of the time we're guessing, right? Or we'll hear people say, well, I could tell that they really wanted this. They said this, but I knew that they really didn't mean that. And again, then we're kind of taking a stab in the dark and we don't really know. When we ask people, which is
Mhm.
brave, we will often get an honest response, and sometimes that hurts. So to your question around boundaries, why don't we do this more often? Well, sometimes we're afraid to hear the answer, or is do how do you feel about having dinner with my parents this weekend, right? Or
Mhm.
how did that feel when I said that to you? Or what do you really want from me right now? And yet I find that when couples are willing to very courageously do that with each other, we're no longer responding to the stories that we've formed, which are typically not about them, right? Those stories are typically so much more about my own family of origin or my own nervous system reactions from my trauma history.
Mhm.
And it's not really what's happening in the moment. So I try to help move into a culture of asking and checking and saying things like, I'm telling myself a story right now that you're angry with me. Is that accurate? Right.
Mhm.
And leaving space for the other person to say, oh my goodness, no, that is not what's happening. And then the hardest part is to believe that, right? Even if our own story is saying, that's not it. I can tell from Erin's face that she's thinking something different. That it's an act of love to be willing to accept the story that our partner says is actually happening for them.
Do you think a lot of it is that fear base that if I do accept it and it's not true, then this happens or that happens or
Yeah, I think a lot of it's very fear-based, and I think a lot of it is, kind of coming back to that theme of codependency, that we learn, many of us early on, that we get rewarded if we accept responsibility for other people's emotions. This is a
ooh, where do we
yeah,
learn that? Please dive into that.
yeah. We often learn it through no, poor intentions or, maliciousness. We often learn that when we're really young. And,
Mhm,
it's often really good kids who might look around their family system and say, wow, there's some upset here. There's some chaos, or my parents, are struggling in some way. Maybe if I'm a better kid, this will all feel better. Right, which is actually really heartbreaking when we see it happen live with kids, because of course they can't, right? In no world can a 5-year-old protect the emotions of their mom or dad, or, protect the family system that is, really spiraling because of some challenges. And yet we'll try. And we often get positively rewarded for that. Oh, what a great kid. Oh, thanks so much for being so sweet with your grandparents.
mhm.
And, it's not binary. Of course, we want kindness. We want people to be caring for each other. And we can learn so quickly that my emotions are less important than somebody else's. If I put my needs out, I might not get them met. And I'm going to just try to make sure everybody around me is okay.
Hmm. Now, how, from the other side as a parent, do you catch something like that? Because sometimes it could just be they're nice and
Hmm.
being helpful, and
Yes.
the family system's having a good day.
Yes. It's a great
So,
question.
because I'm a mom, and I'm like, well,
Hmm.
in my head, I'm like, I done that? Probably. But
Yeah.
how do we catch it?
Yes. I'm a
Be
mom
more
too.
aware of the differences?
Yep. So I'll tell you a little story from my family, and this is
Oh,
really
please.
how I think about this. So I have two kids as well, and they're 14 and almost 12 at this point. When they were little, like 1 and 3,
Mhm,
I came in the room, and the 1 year old was just starting to stand up. That kind of wobbly baby,
mhm,
about to fall down, kind of so cute,
mhm.
right? And his older brother, who was about 3, was just dancing in circles around him. And I said, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" And he said, "I'm make sureing he doesn't fall down."
Oh,
Right. So sweet. And
why did you have
in
to
that
stop?
moment, right, it's like make
Mhm,
sureing. That is what we're so often doing. And there's something that felt so emblematic about that to me because
mhm.
in what world can a 3-year-old really keep a 1-year-old from falling down? He can't. And yet he's expending so much energy trying to do that. And he would probably feel really bad if his brother fell down. Meanwhile, I doubt this was going on in the head of my 1-year-old. But if we extrapolate that up to, older children, adolescents, or even adults, if I'm make sureing you, it doesn't actually feel very good. We feel it as a sense of maybe I'm not actually competent in this moment, or maybe she
Oh,
doesn't trust that I can stand up on my own, or, I just want to make sure you remember our appointment. Well, of course, I remember our appointment. It can actually bring up a lot of defenses or kind of set the stage for people feeling like they have to prove how competent they are to us. And a
mhm,
lot of it is, what is your intention? So that's the question that I
mhm.
often will ask myself, and I do this all the time, right? As a parent, I completely step in it many, many times
Oh,
a day,
I
right?
just tell people my only benefit is that I can tell my children's future therapist the moments I screwed up. It's
Yes,
not gonna stop
exactly.
them.
It's not going to stop them.
Mm-mm.
Maybe we can apologize for them, name them, right? That's amazing
Right.
if we can do that.
We can do
Um,
that, but they're gonna.
yeah, yeah. So I actually, because it was my son who created that term, he has, by the way, written on a napkin that he copyrighted that term, which is hilarious.
Good
I'll just
for
use
him.
that, right? I'm like, "Gosh, was I just make sureing you?" And he'll say, "Yeah, I think a little bit." And, if we really get down to it, what is our intention in that moment?
Mm,
If our intention is, "I love you and I wanna give you this gift of my time," right? Or,
mhm,
"I can tell that you've had a tough day, and it would actually feel really good to me to take over dinner tonight and do that." Right, that's a loving intention, that's kind. Our kids might be kind and loving and wanna go give their grandparents a hug because they wanna go give their grandparents a hug.
mhm,
If the intention is, "I wanna make sure you're okay," right? If the
mhm.
intention in my mind, I think of this as kind of putting on our make sureing glasses, that if the intention starts with, "Well, I just wanna make sure that."
Ah, okay, red flag.
Right, we may be controlling something that's not ours to control, right? We may be attempting to get in there and manage somebody else's emotional experience because we worry, because I'm afraid that if I don't, you're going to fall or you're going to forget something or you're going to
Mhm,
relapse, right? And we can see it in so many of these dynamics. So I think that intentionality is a really important crux to kind of trying to determine, is this behavior that's really just a loving, authentic, kind gesture, or is this starting to tiptoe into more of that codependency, preventing you from having consequences kind of dynamic?
Which kind of goes back to your point about asking.
Mhm.
We have to
Yes.
talk to each other and ask each other these difficult questions, even when
Yeah.
we may not like the answer back.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. I don't know about you, but within my own practice, I feel like in the air codependency and nervous system showing up just completely dysregulated just seems to
Mhm.
be on the increase.
Yeah. Yeah. I do too. And it's interesting. I don't know if it's really increasing or if we're just more aware of it and have better ways of talking about it now.
Yeah,
I'll take it because I'm glad we're talking about it and I'm glad
right.
that I think even just the term codependency has been through so many iterations of, being really embraced, being pathologized, being seen as, just around addiction. And I think now it's
Mhm.
become much broader, which I appreciate because it's just something that we can talk about as a human dynamic that so many of us will fall into. And from my perspective, the problem is that it's just not effective. It doesn't bring us closer to people in the way that we really want it to.
Mhm.
Most people who identify as having some codependency are really kind people who so value relationships and connection, and that's why we dance in circles around the people we love so much. And so the fact that it actually can create distance. It actually can lead to attachment ruptures rather than making our
Mhm.
attachment feel more secure. That feels so important to kind of get the word out about that when this comes up, I often do come back to that idea of secure attachment, which if we really boil it down in a probably more reductionist way than it needs to be,
Mhm.
when we feel securely attached, whether it's to our parents, our children, or our partners, we essentially are meeting two criteria. We're seen and known and loved as we actually are, which is important and hard to do if we're pretzeling ourselves codependently to be just only the version that we want that person to
Them
see
to
of
be,
us,
yeah.
right?
Mm.
How can I feel seen and known and loved as I actually am if I'm not as I actually am with that person? And the second component of secure attachment is that we feel seen as competent by that person.
Oh, that's a piece I hadn't thought about.
It's a piece that I often forget too, and we know it when we feel it. As a child, if our parents say to us, "Hey, kiddo, I have really high expectations for you because I know you can do this." Right? I've seen you work
Mhm.
so hard and I know you can do more than you think you can. Like, that's both of those things. You are so competent, and I know it because I know you. And then we can really go out there and fly and live our lives. If we have just the love, but I don't really see you as very competent, it doesn't work, right? We don't get too attached
Mm.
to people in the way that we want to. And then we're constantly working to prove our competence. And that make suring it does unintentionally kind of remove one's competence. If I have to make sure you remember all your appointments, then you probably don't believe that I know you can remember your appointments without me. And so when we're dancing around someone trying to make sure that nothing bad ever happens to them, we're actually in a way rupturing our attachment with them.
Hmm. How do you convince, approach, whatever the wording is, say for an older couple where the stereotypical wife is always keeping the appointments, making the phone calls, doing everything, even though her partner is totally
Mhm.
capable.
Yes. I
How
work
you
with a lot
can
of those.
how
Mhm.
you convince that person to let go of that, knowing that, yeah, that other person might forget an appointment,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. It comes up a lot and often in exactly the way that you're talking about. Sometimes the genders are switched, but
Yeah.
it's a very normal relationship pattern that I see. The way I usually start is by helping each person talk about how uncomfortable that feels for them. That really if we get underneath these dynamics, nobody's enjoying that. If I'm make suring my husband
Mhm.
XYZ, I'm stressed and anxious, and they don't feel great. They feel less competent. And it can codify itself over time where now this person really doesn't know how to do the things. They don't know how to make their own appointments. So I often talk about it as, okay, we've gotten pushed to the ends of this particular spectrum. We cannot we can't work this unless both people are willing to take steps back in toward the middle. So
Mhm.
we can't change that dynamic by one person simply saying, "All right, I'm just not doing any more stuff anymore." Because then things will fall. And we can't change that dynamic by the other person saying, "Well, I'm gonna just start doing all these things," because then we run into a lot of friction. It's like, "But you're taking my job, right? I need to I don't know what to do
Mhm.
anymore."
What's my role now? Yeah.
Yes.
How am I needed?
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And so, it's really baby steps where we're just trying to kind of tip the scales and provide a little bit of evidence that, you know what, look, this person did actually do this thing, and or they can handle the consequences if they didn't.
Very true. Very true. That
Because
can
I
be
think that's
hard
a
though.
it can be very hard, and it's really scary, and particularly for parents, or, in the field that I started in the addiction field.
Oh,
Those
that's
consequences can be
terrifying.
really dire. Exactly. And, so I'm grateful when I get to work with people before it's gotten to that point.
Right.
And, even if the big consequence that we're trying to prevent is dire, we can practice loosening up on these dynamics in other ways and start to just build a little internal evidence that that's not mine to control, and actually it never was, right? Because
Mm.
it's an illusion of control. We aren't actually preventing the baby from falling. We just
No.
think we are.
Mhm. And it makes you feel useful and it gives you something to do.
Mhm.
Also helps you to avoid whatever it is you don't want to think or feel about.
Yes, exactly. Right. I think that's such an important piece of this, Aaron, because if I am dancing in circles around everybody in my life, guess what I'm not doing? My
Mhm.
own work, my own growth, attending to my own anxieties, which are right on my sleeve, but I'm not looking at
Mhm.
them. Yeah.
Because I
So
have
it's
too much to
I
manage.
have too much, right? It's a very protective stance. And, we see it a lot too with people who've had their own experiences with trauma, or, their own difficult relationship dynamics where I'm going to just be useful to everybody else. And then nobody's really going to look under the surface to see, how am I doing?
Mhm. Mm. I wish there was a way to have more of these conversations within just like even the school setting in high school or something, or like
Hmm.
a college level course everybody has to take around your nervous system relationship dynamics, conflict
Yeah.
resolution, like some basic interpersonal skills, like having a manual for how your
Hmm.
body works within
Yes.
dynamics of a relationship.
I do too. I know.
Ugh.
Whenever I'm teaching DBT, interpersonal effectiveness skills, I
Mhm.
often say, we don't come with a manual for how to relate to people, and communicate. Connection is one of our deepest needs, and it's one of the places that we find the most pain too in our lives. And so often it's just that we're being guided by our own scripts and stories
Mhm.
from our lives, or we're walking around with assumptions about what people mean that's not accurate. That there's connection waiting for us, and it's blocked by all of these additional layers. And I so agree with you that I think if we can help our children, or the children of the world recognize, I know you asked me a question earlier that I didn't quite answer, like, how do we do this with kids, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I so try to say to my children, not always
Mhm.
perfectly, is I can handle my own emotions, right? I am an adult.
I
And
like that.
if I'm upset, that is not your job. Right. And I think that is such a simple message. And it's one that I truly believe we typically mean. We just don't say it. And it
Right, we're
helps to
not
get in front of
telling
that.
them that, and so they're
Hmm.
not getting that cue.
Yes,
Mm.
exactly. So, another term that I use a lot is, can we narrate a little bit more of what's happening? Are we willing to say out loud, kind of in that ask versus
Mhm.
guess idea, here's what I'm thinking I'm noticing here, right? Or, wow, I got upset and I noticed that all of a sudden you were right by my side. I want you to know you don't have to take care of me right now, right? To say some of those things that we often are thinking. And, one of here's another one of my favorite questions that I often ask in therapy to try to get at that. If you could say anything and it wouldn't be wrong, what would you say and who would you say it to?
Ooh,
Right? If you could say anything and
wow.
it wouldn't be wrong, right? That's the key because we're
Mhm.
so convinced that it would be wrong. And if we remove that, just even as a thought experiment, you might have just thought something, or your listeners might have just thought, it's like, oh, well, if it
Uh-huh.
wouldn't be wrong, I would,
Yeah, the things I would say. Let me tell
yes, exactly. And that doesn't mean that we're going to go say those things necessarily. And yet, oftentimes when I ask that question, what my client says is so sayable. Like you could actually say that. And even if it's a little bit harsher than you'd like to say it, you could certainly get that message across to someone. And it would probably be really important information for them to know.
Mhm. Well, I think if anything, it would be good practice too. It would help an individual to be able to hear also what they're
Mhm.
thinking and feeling.
Yes.
Um, and then it would also help you to learn to express. And then it wouldn't be on the responsibility of the other person to constantly be asking and checking in because sometimes that can be overwhelming itself.
Yes. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
like that narrating things. That's been part of that.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I think
Yep.
if we if we all could do more of this, I just think it
Mhm.
would reduce our suffering, right? That we
Oh, I
there's
agree.
so much unnecessary suffering in relationships.
There's so much guessing and
Mhm.
game playing, and I just don't understand the need for it, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, coming back to the nervous system and, how I see this play out in couples, because we're I see both individuals and couples, and yet we get it right in front of us when we're working with couples or systems of any sort.
Mhm.
We can bring more mindfulness to our nervous system states really for our benefit and the benefit of our relationships. And when we're in a calm, connected, parasympathetic nervous system state, we're going to do less of that storytelling. We're going to be able to be breathing deeply and looking at our partner's actual facial expressions and remembering that they had a hard day yesterday and all of the additional information. When we are flooded and more in a sympathetic nervous system state, that fight or flight, activated
Mhm.
state, if we're not aware that's happening, we actually don't hear particularly well, right? The
Oh, that's
things,
very true. Yeah.
it's interesting. And, usually if I'm working with couples and I start to hear, well, you said this horrible thing. Well, I never said that. I would never say something like that. I'm like, okay, we were flooded, right? Who knows what you said? I wasn't there. We don't know.
That's so important though, and not a lot of people know that.
Yeah. And it can feel really invalidating to hear you said this terrible thing. Maybe I did. I don't know, right? I really don't know.
Yeah, your
And
lid
so,
was flipped and you're thinking
yeah,
you went offline and you may not remember.
right. I felt like I was supposed to defend myself because that's what my nervous system was telling me.
Yeah.
And all humans have nervous systems, right? So we're all going to have that propensity to not be fully in a nervous system that can connect in that moment. And our job is to know what's happening and to be willing to say, I'm pretty flooded right now. I need to tap out and come back to this. Or, I do want to talk with you about this and I am not going to be my best self right now. Right, just but
Mhm.
catch it on the upswing. And if we have nervous systems that are a little bit more of a hair trigger because of our own trauma histories or relationship, attachment ruptures along the way, we just have to be even more mindful of that because it's not going to be this nice slow up creep process of like I'm getting a little bit more frustrated. It's going to feel really fast, and we're not going to have a huge window to lovingly and gracefully back away from that
Right.
conflict before it gets worse.
Mm. Do you have suggestions for people who are listening or watching and nodding along like, "Oh my goodness, that's me. I'm 0 to 60. It's done before I even catch it."
Mm. One of the things that I like to do a lot with that is look to some of the polyvagal theory work.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yes, yeah. So, we and I know you know about this,
I
I'll
know it,
just
but for people not aware of it, please.
yeah. So, I mean, Stephen Porges and then Deb Dana have come in and just added so much richness to this conversation. And thank God for
Well, I
them, right?
know,
So
right? Like,
grateful.
whew.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this piece of the conversation. So, I won't go into great detail, but the part that I think is helpful for couples, particularly in the therapy room, is we know what triggers feel like, right? We know what trauma triggers feel like in our body, that kind of zing or I looked at your face and I could tell you were mad, right? That just immediate body reaction, like a gut punch. And yet, our body, evolutionarily, we're going to focus on those because our entire nervous system is geared toward safety. Are we safe, right? Am I safe with you? Am I safe in my own body? Am I safe in my environment? And if I get a whisper of danger and lack of safety, I'm going to shut her up and I'm going to protect myself and I'm going to go into that sympathetic nervous system state or maybe even this flattened, dorsal vagal shut down, I'm going to just hide and
Mhm.
isolate kind of state. Either of those, I'm not going to be able to connect with you because it doesn't feel safe. So our nervous system is wired to collect those, right? To collect those moments of danger, to collect the triggers, to be really aware of them. And even the way trauma is stored in our brain, it's kind of scattershot, right? It's everywhere on purpose so that I don't unintentionally walk into the wrong cave where there's a bear, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
And I can't say, well, let me open my file cabinet and find all of the danger cues so that I remember this, right? So, that is why we get knocked over so quickly by our nervous system is because it keeps us alive. And it did for, millennia.
It's doing its job.
Totally. Very, very well, because its job is to keep us living. Its job isn't to keep us happy or connected, right? That's our job.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty modern part of our nervous system that we want to be connected to people. And so we can train that part. And this is where I love the polyvagal theory and everything that has been added to the conversation by it, because we have triggers. There are also what Deb Dana calls glimmers, right? These moments
Mhm.
that we do feel safe and that we do, you know, smile at a stranger and get a
I
smile
love
back.
the glimmers, by the
Yes.
way. I love when that oh, that's
Right.
such a cool idea.
Exactly. And because I know this is a podcast, I'll narrate. You and I both just like put our hands on our upper chest,
Yes, we did.
right? And that's actually exactly where I feel those glimmers.
Mhm.
If I'm out or it's like a beautiful sunrise, I'm like, I feel it, right? I feel safe in the environment. I literally just felt it in my body
Yeah,
when I
you
did that.
feel it, I
Mhm.
smile.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then I look at your face and you're feeling it and we're feeling it together. And if we pay attention to those moments, we start to build up some evidence on the other side for our nervous system
Right.
that we can connect, right? That it isn't
Mhm.
only danger in our world. And we know what that feels like. And so we can start to identify that, in relationships, it's not just neutral or dangerous, it's neutral, dangerous, or safe.
Mhm.
And the more we really lean into those moments of accurate safety, the stronger that muscle gets for us. And the more we can do that deliberately and then kind of notice that upswing as our nervous system is starting to ramp up a little bit into an activated state so that we can have even just that extra split second to say, you know what? this is probably not the right time to have this conversation.
It's so nice when you're able to do that for yourself. It's so
Mhm.
empowering, or even if you don't get it right away, but then in the middle you can be like, "Hold on. Yep, I'm
Yep.
I got to step away. I know I'm having a moment." It just changes the dynamic and the air in the room so quickly. It's amazing.
Yes, exactly. And really in a lovely way, what you just described is a boundary. We were talking about boundaries earlier, and I think often we think of boundaries as this as a wall, like keep out, right? You cannot come to my house, or I won't be your friend anymore, right? But boundaries can be as simple as like, I'm noticing that my nervous system may not be in the right place to have this conversation right now. Or boundaries can even be letting people in, right? I want to feel that glimmer with you. I want to feel safe
Right.
with you. I want to welcome you in a little bit more than I have.
Mhm.
And I think when we are able to really express our boundaries to people we love, it's actually really a trust gesture, right? It's a respect
Mhm.
thing that I respect you and trust you enough to be able to hold this boundary, right?
Mm.
And trust that it's not wrong, right? If you could say anything, it wouldn't be wrong. I'm going
Right.
to trust that you are a healthy enough individual to hear this boundary of mine and not to create stories around it.
I love that reframe.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm gonna steal that too.
Steal away. Yeah. One of
Thank
my
you.
old supervisors used to say, steal from the best, right? Just steal everything. I want the world to understand this and to do all this better because it's just again, I think there's so much unnecessary suffering that we bring in on top of the real pain that we all are actually experiencing every day,
Yes. You don't
right?
need
That's
extra.
bad enough. So
Yes.
avoid avoidable suffering, right? Whenever we can.
No, but I love the idea of being able to present that to the person in your life and say, I'm holding this boundary because I do
Mhm.
trust you. I do trust that you can hear this and follow through with it. And I know that I am safe in doing this. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to tell your partner that.
Yeah, exactly. So
Love
in
it.
couples, yeah, and I love it when I hear that, right? If my partner can say that to me,
Oh,
you
yeah.
better
You're just
believe
like,
I'm gonna stop and whatever I'm doing and
"Mhm."
listen to this boundary, even if I don't like it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Which is so weird because in your head, you're like, I don't like this, but oh,
No, thank you for trusting me, right?
don't like it,
Exactly.
but okay.
Right, right, because
Mhm.
that's what they're thinking and feeling anyway. And in couples therapy, often it's like, "Hey, can we see this as an act of love?" Right? This person is willing to risk the discomfort of saying something that they know you might not like because it's important that they're authentic with you, because they actually want you to know what's happening for them, and they
Yeah.
trust that you can handle it, right? They trust that you can hold it,
Mhm.
and sometimes that's a bit of a fake it till you make it. I'm not gonna say that part out loud in therapy, but, yeah, if we fake it till we make it eventually.
We do.
And I'll hold that trust out there until you show me that it's worth trusting you with this.
Yeah. No, I love that. Kids are so good at that, though. You know,
Mhm.
my niece, she's adorable. She's 2. And I was recently visiting my family up in Chicago. Um, and she was getting ready for bath, and I was helping here and there. And then came the lotion time, and she went, "No, Aunt Ern, Dad."
Mhm.
And my sister-in-law was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No." I'm
Mhm.
like, "She used her voice. She knew
Yes.
she could do it with me." I'm like,
Mhm.
"The therapist in front is just so excited and happy." I'm like,
Right?
"I'm so proud, and you're too."
Yes. Yes.
I was like, "This is perfect. Can I, like,
Yep.
videotape this and
Yep.
share it with people?"
Mhm.
Like, I had
Exactly.
such a proud aunt moment, and then I was, like,
Mhm.
so honored that she knew she could tell me no.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then that somewhere along the way, that turns.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
wish we could catch it quicker for the next generation.
I do too. And I think we are. I think that's a beautiful
Mm,
example of if your niece gets that message a few more times, right, she will learn
Mhm.
adults
True.
aren't damaged by me, right? Adults are not damaged by my
Mhm.
boundaries. I have
True.
healthy people in my life. I can say no, thank you, and it's fine.
Mhm.
Yep, and I have to remind myself of that all the time as a parent of now a teenager and an almost teenager, that their willingness to say, "No, thanks, mom," is so beautiful, right? That is so trusting because I know a lot of kids who wouldn't, who would just go along with whatever and not
Yep.
like it, feel disempowered, feel resentful, feel distrusted, and not say anything. And who parents are like, "Oh, that's great," right?
It's so hard though. I have a 17 and a 14-year-old, and my 14-year-old would constantly ask us not to go to like track practices
Mhm,
or
mhm,
conference and stuff.
mhm,
And the therapist in me is like, I'm so proud and I'm so happy and
mhm.
honored that you can say that your anxiety level gets too high when
Yeah,
you know I'm there. And then the mom in me is like dying and crying.
I know. I
It's
know.
not easy.
It is not easy, and that is your act of love, right? My
Oh,
act of love is to hear what you're telling me and
mhm.
believe that you would only say this to me if you really trusted me with it, and it
Right.
hurts, right? And it
Oh,
hurts.
does
Mhm,
it? It hurts so. And then I had
mhm.
to explain to my wife who was like, "What? No, no." I was like, "No, let me,"
Mhm.
as she would say, therapize the
Yeah,
situation. And then she went, "Oh, god damn it, that does make sense." I was like, "I know.
right. It
It
does.
sucks, right?
Yep,
It's great. He trusts us, but yeah, it does suck."
it does. And by doing what you did, right? Feeling the feelings, having the pain, and still respecting what your 14-year-old said, you didn't put your 14-year-old in the position of having to defend themselves, right? Of having to defend
Oh, I didn't
their
think of that.
wants and needs,
That's
right? You know, if we can
true.
validate it, you know, because if we take the alternative, if we say, "No, that's not okay. I have to be there," then
Mhm.
we're gonna get them. I mean, we can't make people feel a certain way, right? We know that.
But we can
However,
influence or
we can, like, set the stage, right? And
uh,
so then we set the stage for them having to really double down on why they don't want us there, and it makes it really hard for them to change their minds, and it makes it really hard for them to kinda walk back out of that gracefully if, as probably will happen 2 months from now, they want you there again.
right.
Right? It's like, well, now I dug my heels in or, I heard
And
myself
now this
saying
is my
it.
narrative, and you
Yeah.
don't feel like you can change.
Right. Right. Exactly. That moms aren't allowed to be there at the track meet. And instead it's like, okay, I'm paying attention to where you are right now. That makes sense to me. I get it. And it's just a much more open conversation. That idea, and this is so hard for parents a lot, is to validate what their kids are saying, even if it doesn't make sense to them, or even if they disagree, or if it hurts.
Mhm.
That validating just means that it's legitimate to them, that I can see that it makes sense to you,
Right.
and it takes away all of the need to argue for it, right? If that
I
makes
like that.
sense,
Yeah,
then
that
it makes
disarms
sense.
the argument
It
of
does.
who's right, who's
Mhm.
wrong.
Yep. Yep. It's kinda like that jujitsu, that, like, DBT irreverence of, like,
Yes.
"Okay, right? This makes sense," and then as a competent adult, I will go cry in the bathroom and wanna
Yeah.
be at the track meet, right? But that's
Mhm.
not theirs to manage.
I'll be texting
Right.
my moms who are there. What's going on? What's
Yeah.
happening next?
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Right, and I think that's actually how we grow these healthy kids who understand that their feelings are valid and it makes sense, and who trust us. My husband always says we're raising adults, right? That we are raising people we will have relationships with when they're adults. And we want them to know that they can come back to us with their real experience, even if it's different than ours.
I like that. I will often frame things as I only get my kiddos for 18 to 20 years. And
Hmm.
being originally from Chicago, I'm always swearing, and I'm like, I don't want them to be assholes.
Hmm.
And I also would like my future daughter, son-in-law, whatever, to like
Hmm.
me because I
Yes.
didn't raise an asshole. I
Yes.
never thought about the relationship with me.
Mhm.
That perspective of, okay, you are going to be an adult who I
Mhm.
want in my life.
Yeah.
I like that.
Mhm. Yeah. That we're raising these really cool people,
Right.
and of course we
Hopefully.
love them, and I also wanna like them, you know?
Right? I want to see you at the
Mhm.
holidays and not be stressed.
Yes. Yep, exactly, and I want you to want to see me and not just see me because you have to make sure our
Right.
relationship is okay,
Right.
right?
Or you feel obligated to check in.
Exactly, because I think, what a tragedy that would be
Oh,
if that was the reason that my kids wanted to have a relationship with me is because they felt like they had to,
that would
right?
break my heart.
Exactly.
Mm-mm.
Exactly. So
Mm,
I think, if we do all these things that we're talking about, it just makes it so much more possible for them to recognize that they are responsible for their own emotions. I can't,
mhm.
I never could take care of that. Right? It
No.
was never mine. They're
Mm,
not responsible for mine, right? They're not responsible for their future partner's emotions.
mm,
That we can be kind people, and then we trust, right? It's a gesture of trust and respect that I trust you will figure this out. I trust that you'll ask me for help if you need it, right? And I think it allows our kids and our loved ones to ask for help if we're not foisting it upon them.
right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Ugh, it's such a complicated dance.
Yes, it is not at all easy, and I will tell you, I mess it up almost daily, right?
Same. Same.
And it's okay. And then we say,
Yeah.
"Oops, look what I just did."
Yeah.
Right? So it's just a joke in my family now. I'm like, "Was I just make sureing you?" And they're like, "Yeah, yep, you were." I'm like,
I
"Oh,
love
sorry about that."
that. That has to be a title of your book. Make sure.
One day, yep, it's in the back of my mind there. Yep.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. You could even use a picture of his little
His
napkin
little
he had
napkin.
on.
Yep,
That'd be
yep.
so cute.
I know. It says MAKSHUR. That's how he
Oh,
wrote it. Make
you
sure.
are oh,
Mhm.
you have to put that in the
Isn't
book.
that cute? I know.
That's adorable. Oh,
I know. Yeah.
this has been such a fun conversation. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule because I always say I appreciate it because I know you're taking time away from actually getting paid to do what you're good at to come talk to me for free. And so
Hmm.
I acknowledge that and appreciate that.
It is my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. And I really, I have a strong value about just destigmatizing all of this. And I,
Yes.
I think so much of our work as therapists is just saying you are not alone. This is a human experience. And I will do podcasts for free for the rest of my life if I need to help people understand that it's just not pathological, right? This is just something that we do, often well-intended behaviors that get in our own way. Right. So if we
Wow.
can if we can reduce that, I think we'll have a happier, better world. And
I
that's my
hope so.
goal.
But I appreciate your time. Before we go, I always ask everybody, what is one thing you would tell your younger self? Advice, a statement, suggestion, just something that our listeners could grab onto. I mean, you've given
Mm,
us so many good little nuggets, but
I love that question. My younger self.
mhm,
I wish I could go back and tell my younger self, don't ever worry about who do you think you are to want the things you want or to strive for the things that you want to strive for. I think that message, kept me small, and it wasn't a message that anyone said to me. We just,
mhm. You just
we just
make it up for
developed that,
yourself.
and
Mhm,
and I remember so many moments in my life, these really, crux decision moments where I knew what I wanted, I knew what my values were, and I recognized I was holding myself back with that question. Well, who do you think you are to
right.
leave a big job and go back into private practice, right? Who do you think you are to, fall in love with this person, right?
Mhm.
And the answer is I am me, right? And I have every right to want the life I want, to value the things I value. That we're often so held back by internal questions like that.
Oh, so true. I love that. Thank you. And if somebody wants to find you, you're not super big on social media, but if they want to work with you, if they're in the California area, how do they find you?
Mhm. Yeah. So I do have a LinkedIn profile. I know you'll link that on the podcast. I have a website that people can go to if they're curious about my work. It's drjenniferdragonette.com or just drdragonette.com. Either of those will get you there. And I'm a licensed psychologist in California. So I see people in person in Sonoma County and virtually throughout California. And I also have a coaching practice. I work with a lot of rock climbers. It's kind of a
Okay,
interesting
great
niche.
about you. The rock
Hmm.
climbing.
Hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I work with rock climbers actually all around the country just as a coach, and I'm a rock climbing guide myself. So we just do a little bit of different types of work, so people can find me in different ways. But typically, my website's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it.